Years ago, I used to believe family meant sacrifice. I believed love meant saying yes, even when it hurt. I believed helping people meant emptying yourself until there was nothing left. I believed if I gave enough, worked enough, and forgave enough, eventually they would love me the way I loved them. I was wrong. The day I learned that lesson started like any ordinary workday. My name is Riley, and if you've ever felt trapped between loyalty and your own peace, stay with me. Because sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever say is one simple word: no. That morning, I was sitting at my desk answering emails, coffee still warm beside me, when I heard shouting from the lobby. At first, I thought someone was arguing with security. Then I heard my mother's voice, loud, sharp, impossible to ignore. "You ruined this family." Everything stopped. Conversations died, phones stopped ringing. My coworkers looked up from their screens. I turned around and saw my parents marching across the office lobby, carrying years of frustration, entitlement, and anger with them. My father's face was red. My mother's eyes were wet with dramatic tears. And somehow, before they even reached me, I already knew why they were there. My brother Owen. Again. For years, Owen had lived life like consequences belonged to everyone except him. Lost jobs, missed rent, broken promises, and every single time, someone stepped in to rescue him. Usually me. I covered bills, paid deposits, sent money I couldn't really afford to send. I told myself I was helping, but helping and enabling are two very different things. I just didn't know it yet. My father slammed his hand against my desk. "Your brother is struggling because of you," he shouted. I stared at him. Because of me? I looked between both of them, searching for something familiar in their faces. Understanding, compassion, anything. But all I found was expectation. Mom pointed at me like I'd committed some terrible crime. "You have a good job," she cried. "You need to support your family." I swallowed hard. "I already have." "No," Dad snapped. "Not enough." Then he said something I don't think I'll ever forget. "We want your paycheck." Not help, not a loan, not support. Everything, the entire thing. The room fell silent. Even my breathing felt loud. For years, I'd given pieces of myself away. Money, time, energy, sleep, peace. And somehow, every time I gave more, they expected more. Like love had become a debt I could never repay. I looked down at my shaking hands. Then I looked back up. No, just one word. But it felt like lifting a mountain. For a second, nobody moved, nobody spoke. Mom blinked. Dad stared, like they genuinely couldn't believe what they'd heard. Then Owen walked through the office doors, hands shoved in his pockets, smirking, like he'd already won. "Nice office," he said casually. "Must be comfortable sitting here while your family suffers." Something inside me tightened, not anger, clarity, because suddenly I saw everything, every holiday where I paid, every emergency I fixed, every guilt trip, every time I convinced myself I owed them something. I wasn't their daughter, I wasn't their sister, I was their safety net, and safety nets only matter when people are falling. "Family doesn't hold people hostage," I said quietly. Owen laughed. Mom looked horrified. Dad looked furious. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. Then my boss stepped out of his office, Mr. Grant. He looked around the room, taking in the chaos. Then he looked at me, and in a calm voice he asked, "Riley, are you okay?" Nobody had asked me that in a long time. Not really. I almost cried right there. But I nodded. Before I could answer, Dad stepped forward. "Our daughter owes us everything," he barked. Mr. Grant looked at him carefully. "No," he said quietly. "She doesn't." Simple words, but they hit me harder than anything else that day. Because sometimes healing begins when someone tells you something you should have heard years ago. You don't owe people your life simply because they are family. Owen moved closer. His voice dropped low. If you don't help me, you're dead to us. Years ago, that would have shattered me. Years ago, I would have apologized, sent money, begged them not to be angry. But something was changing. I looked him in the eyes, and I realized I wasn't scared anymore. Maybe because I was exhausted. Maybe because I'd finally hit the limit. Or maybe because after carrying everyone else for so long, I was finally too tired to carry one more thing. I'm done, I said. Owen laughed. Mom cried harder. Dad looked at me like I'd betrayed him, but I didn't take the words back. Security eventually walked them out. Their voices faded through the lobby, and suddenly, silence. Real silence. Not the silence of fear, not the silence after an argument. Peaceful silence. Mr. Grant placed a hand on my shoulder. You don't need to explain anything, he said. I nodded. But I knew this wasn't over. Families built on guilt rarely let go quietly. A few minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Riley? I froze. Mark? My cousin laughed softly. I hadn't spoken to him in years. He'd moved away long ago, escaped family drama before I even realized escape was possible. I heard what happened, he said. I closed my eyes. Embarrassment rushed through me. I'm sorry, I whispered. He paused. For what? I frowned. For everything. No, he said gently. Stop apologizing. Silence. Then, you know you're not the villain here, right? I didn't answer immediately, because for years I'd been told that setting boundaries was selfish, that saying no was cruel, that choosing myself meant betraying everyone else. But sitting there, staring at my desk, I realized something. The people who benefit from your silence usually hate your boundaries. I laughed quietly, small, broken, but real. Yeah, I said. I think I'm finally learning that. Then Mark said something I'll never forget. I have a spare room if you need it. No conditions, no guilt, no expectations, just kindness. That night I packed a bag, not because I was running away, because I was finally walking toward something. When I arrived at Mark's apartment, he opened the door with a tired smile. Inside smelled like coffee and fresh paint. There was a small room waiting for me, clean sheets, a lamp by the bed, a tiny plant by the window, nothing fancy, but somehow it felt bigger than any house I'd lived in. Because for the first time, I didn't owe anyone for being there. I sat on the edge of the bed and cried, not from sadness, from relief. Mark leaned against the doorway. They'll try to pull you back, he said softly. I wiped my eyes, looked up, and smiled. They can't anymore. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything I'd lost, then slowly realizing what I'd gained. Freedom, peace, space to breathe, space to become someone outside of guilt. I used to think strength meant carrying everyone. Now I know strength sometimes means putting the weight down. Because family isn't supposed to break you. Love isn't supposed to empty you. And choosing yourself isn't betrayal. Sometimes it's survival. Before I fell asleep that night, I made a promise to myself. I will never again confuse sacrifice with love. And for the first time in my life, I believed I was worth protecting.